It's Kim from the Pennington Public Library. Thank you for joining us for a conversation with local author Laura Sims. If you have any questions during the program, please feel free to write them in the Q&A section, and I'll interweave them into my conversation with Laura this evening. You may also comment in the chat window. So let's introduce Laura, shall we? Laura Sims is the author of How Can I Help You?, a New York Times, Publishers Weekly, and Crime Reads Best Book of the Year, and a Library Reads Top 10 Books of July. Sims' first novel, Looker, was included on Best Books list in Vogue, People Magazine, Real Simple, Entertainment Weekly, and more, and is now in development for television by E1 and Emily Mortimer's King Bee Productions. An award-winning poet, Sims has published 4 poetry collections. Her essays and poems have appeared in the New Republic, Boston Review, Lit Hub, and Electric Literature. Laura has worked part-time as a reference librarian, hosting the library's lecture series, and lives in New Jersey with her family. Welcome, Laura. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm very excited to be hosting you on behalf of the Pennington Public Library.
Hi.
Hello, hello.
Great to be here.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you. I I don't know if you know this. I don't think I mentioned to you, but we actually found out about you from another book club in New Jersey. And one of the members is one of the speakers, like a longtime speaker for our library. Her name's Janet Mendel, and she speaks about art and great artists. And she said, Kim, you have to check out this author. We had her for our book group, and this book is great.
That's so nice. I love
Yes.
hearing that. She's lovely.
Yes. And to top it off, I mean, I couldn't resist the cover on to top it off as a librarian. The moment I saw the cover, it drew me in.
I
And
know,
then
right?
and then to find out that you yourself work in a library,
Yeah.
I thought, oh, this is gonna be good. So
Yeah.
um
I'm glad
tell
that's
everyone a
fun.
little about, tell everyone a little about your background in terms of writing and libraries and how you've interwoven the two.
Well, I started, as you mentioned, I started out as a poet. And I was a poet. I mean, I still am a poet, I guess. You never stop being a poet. But I was kind of writing in that world for more than 20 years. And during that time, I was teaching. And I was, an adjunct teacher, instructor at various colleges, teaching creative writing and English, and really loved it. But there was a point at which that kind of seemed like, diminishing returns. And I had always thought about, libraries had always been important to me, and grew up in a library in some ways, and, was introduced to so many books there. And so I had always had in the back of my mind, well, maybe someday I'll go back to library school. And so I finally did that. And around that time, I was starting to write fiction. And anyway, I got my degree kind of slowly, like 4 years, did it part-time, and started working in a library in 2018. So not that long ago, as a reference librarian, because that was like the job that was there. And really loved it, and also really realized, like, I think I had a kind of outdated or romanticized notion in my mind of what libraries were like, even after going through library school. We don't talk about, oh, this is the reality you will face in libraries. There's not a class in that in library school, as you know. And so I was really surprised when I was sitting at the reference desk and started getting these crazy calls and had really fascinating interactions with patrons. And I thought, I started to just scribble notes down. It's not like Patricia. I did not write at work. Do not write my novels at work. I just want to be clear about that. but I was, scribbling notes like when something interesting happened, and I thought, I want to use this somehow. But it took me a while to realize, like, oh, this is becoming a novel. It was kind of a slow journey to
Yeah.
that.
Yes. That's interesting. You mentioned your surprise coming out of
Yeah.
library school and working in a library. And I think I could be wrong, but I think that a lot of librarians face this realization. Even though I think in my grad school, we did have a public library course, but it
Yeah.
still was, I think, far from the reality. And every library is so different.
Yes,
So,
that's true.
yeah,
I feel like most of my peers in the class who were mostly much younger than I was, they were already working in libraries. Like they were working and, had gone back to school so they could get permanent jobs. So I feel like I was in the minority of people who didn't really get like what the contemporary public library was. So,
yeah.
yeah.
I just can't help but ask. So, how much of you is in Patrizia and or Margo?
Oh my gosh, it's all me. No, I'm just kidding. Definitely, characters come from parts of you. I feel like there's parts of me in both of them. I trying to think. I mean, Patricia obviously is a writer and she's frustrated, she's faced rejection. I, like every other probably writer on the planet, I've faced rejection too. And so I did channel a lot of that experience into building her. At first, I had her like getting Margo, and we can talk about that later, but she was easy. But Patricia, as her foil, she started out just as a frustrated reference librarian, like somebody who was shocked and not happily shocked. I was happily shocked by the disconnect between like my notions of libraries and the reality, but she is like disappointed, as you know. But I just had her as that, and it was too simple and a little boring. And then I thought, wait, what if she's a writer? And that really, really elevated, not only her character, hopefully, but also just the tension and the possibilities of what would happen between her and Margo. So,
Wow. So you start off writing these notes, you're at the library, and you
yeah,
realize, as many of us librarians, I think, do, there is a lot of story here at the library. There
endless. Yeah.
endless possibility, endless
Yes.
characters, so to speak, people, interesting people, and a lot of people who like to come in to share their stories with
Oh,
us
yeah.
as
Yes.
librarians. So you're writing notes, you're taking notes, and so where do you go from there? How did this novel form from your notes?
Well, it's funny. So I had the notes that I was taking, and I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll write an essay about like the contemporary library. I was kind of in a dead zone of writing at the time, but I had always wanted one of my dreams was to write a female serial killer novel. And
Ooh,
so I had, I do keep other notes of like book ideas or story ideas. And I had this one note that I was really like attached to about this serial killer nurse that I had come across in a podcast named Jane Toppin. And at some point, these two threads merged. I wish I could remember what the moment was when I thought, oh, wait, I could put her in a library and see what happens. But I did start like with her voice and the setting and kind of went from there. There was no Patricia at first at all. It was just, okay, reformed serial killer nurse in a library. What happens? But it kind of built.
wow.
Mhm.
And so it started off with serial killers, which, mind you, I mean, you know the famous female serial killers, but for the most part, they're usually male serial killers. So
Right.
this is new and different. And you
That's
are inspired by this one serial killer. Could you tell us a little bit about her, and what inspired
Yeah,
you about her?
yeah. And I didn't want to write like a straight serial killer novel, meaning I didn't want to write, oh, watch this person as they go around killing people. That's why I enjoyed having it be, okay, she's done killing, right? And she's come to this sanctuary. But yes, Jane Toppin, so I learned about her from the podcast Criminal, which is a wonderful true crime podcast for anyone who's interested. And this was one of their early episodes that I heard years ago. And she was in the 1800s in Massachusetts, and she was a nurse. And she was this wonderful, cheerful, efficient nurse. People loved her, colleagues loved her for a while. All her patients loved her, but she was also killing her patients. And the way she went about it was one of the things that was fascinating to me was the disconnect between her personality and like outward mask, I guess, or her public, presentation, and then these dark things she was doing. But the other thing that was fascinating to me was, like my Margo, she was an atropine. And as they died, she would climb on top of them and be sexually like thrilled while they were dying, and was, watching them die. So I found that really fascinating. I know it's super creepy and morbid, but I found it fascinating because so often, as you said, we have the male serial killer, right? And the women are victims, dead bodies. So in a strange way, I found it empowering, right? To see this woman in this position. And not only that, but I feel like when there are women who kill, which happens rarely, right? Women don't kill. We are not socially programmed to kill. We're socially programmed to be caretakers in most cases. And so it's just really fascinating to have somebody who breaks through that kind of stereotypical role and also was killing for pleasure. I think often when we hear about women who kill, there are a lot of motives ascribed to them. Oh, she did it for revenge. Oh, she was angry. Oh, she was this or that. But in this case, there is no motive, right? She's clearly, a psychopath, and she was enjoying herself. And I found that really fascinating in a really dark way. So,
Wow. I'm curious. So, and I too, I think a lot of people share your fascination with perhaps people who are serial killers or people who are very different than how we would think. So, going from reading about Jane and then translating it onto the page, how do you get into the mindset
yeah,
of Margo?
I don't know. It was really easy. That's so disturbing to admit, but it came pretty easily. I mean, just because she is so cheerful, right? I mean, that's one of the things I love about her, is that she has this very positive, like, outward demeanor. It was pretty easy to slip into that and be able behind the scenes to kind of show her as cold as ice and, you know, full of nerve and doing strange things. I don't know how to explain it, but it
Yeah.
was not difficult. I think it is really fun. And I did this in my first novel too. It's very fun and like challenging also to put yourself in the mind of someone like this. Like, it is a kind of freeing, or it's freeing, it's cathartic, in a strange way, but it can be really exciting to like write in the mind of somebody who is, like you said, so different from you. And yeah, I don't know.
Wow.
kind of like tap into things that are similar,
Mhm.
that's also interesting.
Yeah, that always fascinates me, even with actors who
Yeah.
are playing people who are so unlike themselves.
Yeah.
And it's almost jarring to see them as
Yeah.
themselves after you've associated them with this character
Yes.
for so
I,
long, for example.
I know. I had that experience recently watching Ripley, the new version of Talented Mr. Ripley that's on Netflix. It's amazing. It's a beautiful, beautiful show. And it's the star, and I don't know his name, but I think of him as the hot priest from Fleabag.
Oh, no,
I
I
don't know
don't
if
know
you
him.
watched
I
Fleabag.
haven't heard of the
Yeah.
show. My goodness. But I
My
watched the
gosh.
movie, which is one of my favorites. Not the
Okay.
original movie, but the Matt
Okay.
Damon, Jude
This is
Law,
like much
Gwyneth Paltrow
different,
movie.
and it's all
Okay.
black and white. Anyway, the whole point was that he plays a totally different character. He's like cold and reptilian in this version of Ripley, and it was so unsettling. He's so good, but such a different character from what you've seen him do before.
Wow. I have to put that on my watch
Yeah,
list.
you
So
should.
thank you
Yeah.
for letting me
It's much
know.
closer to the novel, I think, and it's
Okay.
like slow and it's really, really good.
Okay.
Great summer watch.
Yeah. I know that one of our viewers, Tara, is a huge Talented Mr. Ripley fan. So
Oh,
Tara, take
really?
note. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So, um, speaking of characters and their voices, do you have anything from the book you would like to read to prepare us in
Oh,
terms of Margo, from Margo's voice? We would love to
sure,
hear
yeah.
Margo's
Oh,
voice.
yeah. Let me see. And so most people have not read the book, is that right? Because I don't want to read anything that's like,
Oh, you know
ooh,
what? I think I could be wrong. People feel free to chat in the chat window if you have not read the book, but I know a handful of people have read the book
okay.
because
I
next week we're having a book group
oh
discussion.
good. So I don't think this one, I think this one is fine. Oh, I love the hot priest from Fleabag and the new Ripley. Tara's
Oh,
already
see,
read. Have you
she
seen it?
she she's
Yay.
already on it. She's already on it.
That's great. Oh my gosh.
Oh, and yes, Barbara's read your book. So
Okay.
I know a handful of people have read it for our
Okay.
book club. All right.
Okay, so this is just a little part of Margo. Very short. But Margo, she's referring to herself in third person here, for a second. But Margo tries not to linger in the past. It does her no good. She was wronged, she moved on. Movement is key, I've found, to always be moving wherever I am, even in circles sometimes. I sweep by the computer aisle whenever I can, push in the empty chairs with my hip, and straighten the stacks of notepaper and tiny pencils arranged near each station. As I make my rounds today, a rumpled old man leans back and calls me over, his sad eyes brimming with almost death, his need to be held and possibly bathed, tugging fiercely at my insides. Miss, can you help? He asks. When I reach him, I put my face close to his and look at his screen. I smell his sour breath, the unwashed scent of his clothes, and don't falter for a second. I inhale deeply through my nose, so he'll know I'm not repulsed one bit, not even one tiny bit. The screen froze, he says. I push a button here and there, toggle the mouse back and forth, then sigh. We've got to shut this thing down and start it back up, I tell him. Sometimes that's all it takes. Don't you worry. I make the screen go black. Then I punch the power button and bring it back to life. His face lights up like he's seen the workings of a god. Thank you, miss. Of course. I hold him with my eyes, probing those pathetic depths. Then I let him go. Do I feel a twinge of frustration? I do. Those eyes begging me for help. I want to help the way I used to, but I left the last hospital in the dust, and that's how it should be. No, should be doesn't matter. That's how it is. Margo doesn't live in some imaginary world where Jane goes on doing her rounds. Margo lives in the real world, the library. There. And
Oh, Margo.
that is one of my top tech fixes at work is turn it off and turn it back on. So that's definitely drawn from my life.
I think that everyone here has probably experienced that too, even at home. That
Yeah,
that fix
I know.
is
I know. When someone comes up and says the computer's not working, I just go and do that. Usually works.
yes. So you've had experience in a library,
Yeah.
but have you had experience in a hospital with nursing, or where do you draw
No.
from in terms of the
Um,
nursing part?
I didn't even really think about it when I was writing this, but my mom had a long illness before she died, and I spent a lot of time in the hospital with her. And I think that there is some of that in this. And even the like nurse part, I do, of course, her nurses were wonderful for the most part, but I do remember like to this day, and she died many years ago, but I still remember this one nurse who I don't know was like possessive of my mother, and I didn't like her, like I thought she was a little creepy. So I honestly didn't think about it when I was writing, but doing these interviews when people ask me that, it's been like a light bulb, like, oh yeah, I have spent time in hospitals, but only on that side.
That is amazing to me, how you're drawing from these experiences that have come in and out of your life. I think um, everyone, Laura and I talked briefly before this program tonight, and Laura says that she doesn't do the intensive type of research that's sometimes associated with some authors. And I find that so fascinating. Do you find um, I guess when you work with your editor,
Yeah.
do you often find, because I get a sense that sometimes editors ask authors what they're thinking behind what they're writing and where they're getting the information from.
Mm.
How is your relationship with your editor in terms of their feedback and how you
Well,
respond?
I wish I had only had one editor, but I have had several in my short fiction career. Really, the kind of relationship you're talking about now for most writers is with their agent, because editors change so frequently. During the production of How Can I Help You, I lost two editors, one after the other.
Wow.
Just they move, they go to new jobs. And I loved working with both of them, but they're gone.
Oh,
And they both had very different styles. But with my agent, that is who will ask me those questions or push me on certain things or suggest, like before we take the book to the publishing house. And then of course there are more edits that come up and that are often even deeper. I don't feel like because my books are not, I don't think they don't need a lot of research. I don't get a lot of questions about that. I get more questions like for instance, I remember one of the big suggestions from my editor was to enhance the detective role a bit. So he was a lot more maybe there were only just a couple of references to him, and I added a couple, like plumping things up that were already there, sometimes moving things around for pacing, things like that, so more structural. But yeah, so far I haven't had a lot of,
yeah.
I mean, this next book that I'm working on is
Mhm.
kind of historically based, and so I am curious if I'm going to need to go back and like do more. I have done a lot more traditional research for this one, but in general, as I was telling Kim, I like to, I read a lot around the subject, like for How Can I Help You? I read the library book by Susan Orlean, which is a wonderful book and also is true crime. And was very helpful. I read I think there's one biography of Jane Toppin called Fatal by Harold Schechter. And that was super useful. And yeah, learned things about her. And I think I read a book about a nurse like going on her rounds, things like that. But I do take notes from the books, but I don't sit there with the notes in front of me and inject these things into the text. I'm more like let it sink in organically, kind of, and inform it just from what I've absorbed from what I've read. And
Mhm.
so far, that has worked well.
Wow. It has. It has. Um, I spoke to an author once who called herself, I believe, a pantser,
Oh,
which
yeah.
means
I'm
that
a,
she told us that she writes by the seat of her pants, as
Mhm,
opposed to someone who outlines everything from beginning to end. And I've talked to authors who do that as well.
mhm.
Uh, how would you describe how you plot out your stories?
Definitely a pantser. I do get like it's more that I get like a character's voice. In this case, it was Margo, and kind of follow where it leads. I mean, I do have a general idea of what the story is, but I do not follow an outline. I tried to do that when I was writing fiction early on. I mean, really, I started writing fiction about 10 or 11 years ago. And then I was kind of like, okay, so, and I'm a very organized person in my real life, but like, so I would try to write these, outlines, really involved outlines. And I found that they killed the book. They just absolutely killed any kind of like, impromptu things that come up. I'm sure people who outline have a better way of dealing with that than I did, but I really didn't like it and felt that it did kill the kind of energy that you need to make a book really, grabby and interesting. So I just follow the characters really. And I often,
Okay.
yeah, and for both novels that I've written that were published, I have gotten like a vision almost of the very, very end of the novel as I'm writing it. And I like hold on to that. And then it's just a matter of like, okay, how do I get there?
All right. Wow, like
Yeah.
a maze, but you see
See
the
the
cheese
end.
at the end.
Yeah, the cheese at the end. It's just I find the hardest part of writing is like the of writing a novel is the middle end, like right before the end. I find that to be really, really hard and full of many revisions.
Whenever I read a book or watch a show,
Yeah.
I realize how important that ending is. I always call it like sticking the landing,
Yes.
in gymnastics,
Yes.
because you can wander around in the book, but if the ending doesn't stick, it doesn't leave you with that satisfaction.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
That's true.
yeah. So you had been writing poetry for many, many years beforehand. How has your career as a poet informed your writing as a novelist?
Well, I think I do have a pretty spare style. I think a lot of times when people hear like a poet who becomes a novelist, they expect a flowery novel full of metaphors and stuff, but that was not my style as a poet. I was like very spare. Um, and so that has remained the same. I really love spare writing. Yeah, I also love flowery writing to read, but for some reason I write in a very spare style. I also care a lot about the sound of words on the page. So even in my kind of sometimes plain style, I am really paying attention to the rhythm of the sentence or how the sentences go together. I spend a ton of time revising and really like worry over each word. So that I think, and I'm also very image driven in my fiction, which is not true for a lot of fiction writers, but like all of the same things that motivated me as a poet motivate my fiction. Emotion, imagery, voice, and I mean, those are the main things. So for me, like plot and setting, those things are things I have to work on, work for. But the driving forces are the same, and they're very like, you know, ethereal, like abstract and poetic.
You know, it definitely does show. I actually have a quote from you from another interview, I believe,
Okay.
where you spoke of Jenny Offel's Department of Speculation as being a very big influence in your first novel.
Yes.
And you said, quote, her book showed me that it was possible to write something short and intense and just as meaningful and engaging as a 400-page tome. And
Yeah.
I think,
Stand by.
yes, and I think that's very true when you talk about being very deliberate and judicious with your word choices. That definitely is a mark of a poet, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And I do love short novels. I mean, I can also really get into a long novel, but there are a lot of long novels that I just want to like take a red pen to, cut some pages, you know? But I love short novels so much, and I read a lot of them.
Yes. Um, Laura, so we heard a little bit from Margot's voice. Could we hear something from Patricia's voice?
Yeah, sure. And let me see. I know I have. Oh, no, wrong one. Where is it? Okay, this is kind of later on. So I'm a little worried if people haven't read it.
Feel free to mute for the spoiler for those who haven't read
Yes,
the book.
mute if you haven't read it. I'm trying to think where to start. Okay. So this is Patricia thinking about writing, like what she should do. She's got this moral dilemma as she is writing something. Okay. And sorry, I'm just thinking of where to start. Oh no, I'm just gonna read a shorter piece. I'm sorry. Okay.
No worries.
So yeah. I console myself thinking that at least I wasn't a part of that. And she's talking about the way that Margo, which is true, by the way, this part of Margo is based on Charles Cullen, who was a serial killing nurse right here in New Jersey, who killed
Oh,
hundreds of people. And he was able to kill so many because he was moved from one hospital to another with no retribution at all, even with referrals, because the hospitals did not want to take responsibility for what they were pretty sure was going on. So he was injecting patients with insulin, and many of them died. And then the hospital would figure it out, move him to the next hospital, and it
my
kept going
God.
for a long time. So Margo, that happened to Margo too. So I kind of modeled that on him. So Patricia's thinking about that. I console myself thinking that at least I wasn't a part of that, a systemic scandal of epic proportions, a reason for no one to feel safe setting foot in a hospital again. I'm not anywhere near that bad, that culpable. And what if I did call Detective Parson and let him lead Margo away in handcuffs? I think of the yawning emptiness at the circ desk, the achingly blank pages in my notebook, and bitter disappointment, my steadfast companion creeping back. There would be no novel. There would be nothing again, nothing but this job, which is only tolerable while Jane's story sustains me, while Margo sits nearby. I'll call Detective Parson when I've finished the book, or when I've found an agent and sold it successfully, or maybe just on the cusp of the book coming out. Of course, I couldn't do that. Then he'd read my novel and know what I'd kept to myself. I'd be outed as Margo's accomplice, which might sell books, but I'd be vilified and possibly imprisoned. So the only scenario for telling Parson is telling him now, dropping my pen, closing the notebook, forgetting my hopes for the book. I sit for a moment, imagining that. After a short, distracted pause, my hand begins to move across the page, slowly at first, then faster, capturing Jane and her setting, the shine on her neat blonde hair, how silently she moves into a patient's room at night, how the glow from the machines lights her serious face as she straightens sheets, lifts heads to plump pillows, then leans down close, so close to her beloved patients, her special ones. So much for picking up the phone.
Thank you for that. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Just the beauty of Patricia's imagination as a
Yeah.
writer, and then how close she comes to reality. They always say the truth can be stranger than fiction.
Yeah. Totally.
Wow, wow. Tara wants to know
Yeah.
what some of your favorite short novels are.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So definitely recommend Department of Speculation by Jenny Ofel. Um, and Days of Abandonment by Elena Ferrante is one of my favorite novels. And that one really, really inspired me to write my first novel, Looker. It was the first time, or it felt this way. It felt like the first time I had read a woman's like her rage just raw on the page, and it was such a beautiful thing. So I love that. And I'm gonna space out on my other favorites, but I do have a lot of others. Oh, I love it's called The True Deceiver by Tove
Oh,
Jansson. I can type
yeah.
some of these in the chat too. She,
I'm
is
taking
famous.
notes.
Oh, good. So she is famous for the Moomin books, right?
Oh,
Valley.
okay.
But she also, wrote novels. I just put it in there. And Days of Abandonment I'll put as well. And that one's a wonderful short novel. Yeah, if I think of others, I will write
Please
it
do.
down.
I'm always, and I know Tara knows this, I'm always looking for uh short novels and novellas because we actually have a book club at our library called Too Busy for Books book
Oh,
club.
perfect. Yeah.
And the book club has been running for, I believe, 13 years now. And we've had a couple of repeats in books just because I would miss them. I have a whole list, like a long running list, and I would be like, "Oh no, we already did that one. Oh well, I assigned it again." But for the most part, we haven't had a repeat more than twice. So I'm always looking for
Yeah.
more
Oh, I'll
recommendations.
mention one other, which you probably already know, but My Sister, the Serial Killer by Oyin
Oh,
Braithwaite. That's really wonderful. I'm sure some people have read it. That's great. Yeah.
wow. So Tara is wondering if anyone else thinks that Patrizia is kind of as evil as Margo.
Yeah. I
um,
do.
Yeah, this is interesting because I think you mentioned your inspiration from Days of Abandonment
Mhm.
about a female character's, I think, quote, you said unfettered rage at one time. I found a quote of yours,
Yeah.
um, and being inspirational. And I always find it very interesting the different types of, I guess, feminism there is. And I guess what we as women are allowed to be and to not be. And I
Mhm.
know that I believe your characters in Looker are also female characters.
Mhm.
Could you expand upon, your thoughts about writing these female characters and giving them this depth and
Yeah.
I guess the permission to be who they are?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's great that more and more, different female voices are coming out in contemporary fiction and elsewhere. And yes, the like freedom to be ugly, to be nasty women, to express rage. Those things are really still, I think, exciting to find in fiction, because they've been censored for so long, and women were not supposed to express things like that. We're supposed to be, as I said, like caretakers, kind, and all of these things that women are supposed to be. So I really am drawn to those books that show complicated women or women being complicated. I think is really liberating still. And
Yes.
so it was fun to have like two women who are in these roles. Like being a librarian is a caretaking job in many ways. It's not as intensive, of course, as being a nurse, but to be inside of those roles and to be behaving badly, I guess, kind of like embracing the role and pushing back against it at the same time, which is what also drew me to Jane Toppin, was this kind of, it is weird to think of her as feminist because she's murdering people. So that's a little bit much, but it is fascinating when someone inside of a caretaking role abuses that role and kind of breaks out of it
Yes.
as a woman. Yeah.
Yes. Um, when you when you first came up with Patrizia, how did you envision her, and how had she evolved, I guess, throughout your writing of her?
Yeah, she really did evolve. I mean, Margo was fun to write from the get-go. Patricia had to work at a lot, but by the time I was really and had gotten her character, she became more fun for me to write than Margo, because she does, Margo is very like, of course, she has outbursts and stuff, but she's static in many ways. But Patricia really changes over the course of the book. And like I think a couple people were saying, is she as bad as Margo Jane? I mean, I think so. Like, I think she taps into those kind of darknesses inside of her and becomes somebody who allows ambition and obsession to kind of turn her into someone who would step across the line. And those people are really fascinating to me. The people
Yes.
who seem normal, and do a lot of things that are expected of us by society. And then it's just really interesting to think, like, what does it take to push someone across a line like that? And with Patricia, it's this intense failure and this incredible drive she has that eventually like lead her there.
I I hesitate to ask this question, but I am curious, in that we are left with a lot of, I guess I call it the spinning top at the end of Inception, the movie. The uncertainty of how things actually, we know to a certain extent how things play out, but then we're uncertain as to the future.
Mhm.
Do you, in your head, do you have a vision of how, I guess, Patricia's life plays out after this novel, or is it something that's just a fog out there?
Um, I really don't. I know some readers do not like this, like my abrupt endings, but they're very intentional. Just let me say, like, this is not just me being sloppy. These are the way, like, I love ending with some ambiguity, leaving readers with questions and uncertainty about, yeah, like the characters' futures. I don't really know. I like not knowing. And I like also really exploring like a slice of life and then ending it and leaving it to. I think this also, comes from writing poetry, is that in poetry, you're as a reader, you really have to collaborate with the poet, right? And I think in fiction you do to an extent in some fiction. I'm always drawn to fiction and poetry that like leaves room for the reader. And so I think I write that way, not giving you every single thing or tying everything up in a neat bow. Because I don't really sometimes I like to read books like that. Like right now, I'm really enjoying the Thursday Murder Club series.
Oh, yes.
I love it. And that is definitely one that like gives you everything and it's really delightful. But I do not like writing that way for some reason. So who knows? But I do like to end ambiguously, and I don't really think about it. People ask me that a lot with my first book, which is very ambiguous, kind of at the end, what the future holds for the character. But I just like to leave her where I left her, let you think about it.
Yeah. I
Um,
really enjoy that too. Sometimes a little bit of mystery,
yeah,
a little bit of imagination at the end.
yeah,
Um, Actually, it's better to leave people wanting more sometimes. Sometimes when you don't leave people wanting more,
yeah,
it, it's you know,
I
it
know.
kind of ends it right there.
Yeah. It's very hard to satisfy readers with an ending.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll say
Yeah.
that as a reader too, myself, like there's so few endings that are perfect for me. It's very hard. Like that's what the writer wanted to do, and maybe it doesn't work for you, or maybe it does. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
interesting.
I've also read books before, and participated in, I guess, media before, where I just decided as the viewer or the reader to write my own ending. I was like, nope, I don't like that ending. I'm just rewriting it in my head.
That's good. That's good.
No, but I enjoyed the ending of this book.
Oh, good. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't see it coming. When you write, do you think about, I guess, in the case of this book as being a thriller, do you think about, okay, how do I make things unexpected for the reader?
Um, Sort of. I mean, I guess I think more about like what needs to happen to these characters to fulfill the story. I guess that's what I think of more and hope that the reader enjoys that too. Um, yeah, I guess my books don't like they don't rely too much, I don't think, on like big surprises or twists. So I don't know. I just try to be true to the character and follow my instincts with the story and hope that that matches with, some percentage of readers out there.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah. It's
definitely.
very hard. I don't know. I think like a typical mystery or thriller, you are kind of following a bit of a formula. And I have wanted to do that. Like I enjoy reading those mysteries and thrillers, and I have read them since I was, reading Nancy Drew, but I don't enjoy writing those. As Tara said, sorry, this popped up. This book reminds
Yeah.
me. Oh my gosh, that's so interesting because I love that book and movie so
Yeah.
much. Notes on a Scandal.
Yeah.
Actually just rewatched it recently. It was still fantastic. So thank you so much for that comparison. And actually my first novel, Looker, is often compared to that book. So maybe you should read Looker, Tara.
Notes on a
You
Scandal
might
by Zoe
enjoy.
Heller. A
It's so
movie with
good.
Kate Blanchett. How
Oh,
come I did
it's
not hear
so good.
about this
It's Kate
before?
Blanchett and Olivia Colman. Wait, is it Olivia Colman? I think so.
I haven't heard of this movie. Tara's
Uh,
always telling me about new things I should
oh,
read and new things
good.
I should, or even old things. It's from 2003. My goodness. Judi
It's
Dench.
Yeah, Judi Dench. Sorry, I get older British ladies mixed up. Wonderful British actresses.
Wow.
Yes, it is so good. It's about a teacher and a student affair and these two women.
Oh,
Oh, it's good. It's so good.
Okay, I'm
Very,
going to have to put this on my list.
yeah, it's great.
If anyone has any questions for Laura, please feel free to put them in the chat. I will definitely relay them. Um, I'm getting a feeling, Laura, that 1 hour is not enough for us, but I will keep us under the hour, I promise. You have another quote for us about libraries, right?
Yeah, sure. Let me see.
I will read the book first, Tara.
Which, yeah, read the book. Yeah,
All
it's
right.
okay. So this is Patricia's first day on the job, and she is sitting at the reference desk ready to go with her degree in hand, master's degree in hand. At 10 o'clock, my desk phone rings for the first time. I'm unprepared. I've been staring at the screen, examining the library website. It's so backward, the resources so minimal and outdated that it's making my head hurt. This will be a colossal job. Reference desk, how can I help you? I manage. Good morning. Can you tell me what time Amanda's Grace is on tonight? The caller asks. I think I've misheard her. I ask her to repeat herself, and she does, practically shouting it this time, as if my hearing were the problem. I'm sorry, I can hear you perfectly fine, but I don't understand the question, I say, hoping my voice won't carry to the circ desk. Now the woman talks to me as if I'm slow rather than deaf. It's a television show. It's on tonight, but I don't know when. So you're calling the library? Yes, ma'am. She's undaunted by how incredulous I sound. I don't have a computer here at home. Got a TV, though, she chuckles. An elderly woman alone at home, looking forward to her TV show. However strange it is that she should call, I humor her and look it up online. 8 o'clock on CBS, I tell her. Enjoy your show. She thanks me, calls me sweetheart, and hangs up. I sit staring at the phone. What the hell was that? I want to tell someone about it, and I look over at Margo, thinking she'd appreciate it. She's laughing with another circulation clerk, a young Middle Eastern woman I haven't met yet. Margo's head is thrown back. She's holding her hands over her heart as if shocked with delight. I can't help but smile, watching her, thinking that somehow she knows that I've told her about my call, and that's why she's laughing. It makes me feel less alone. How far is it from Coopersville to Marston? Another caller, my second one, asks with no preamble. One offbeat call was funny, charming even, but two? I fight back my irritation, use Google Maps, and tell him 23 miles. There's a third call too. I hang on to hope until the man asks, can you tell me the number for Walmart customer service? When we're finished, I slam down the phone. Is this a joke? Why am I getting these calls? I remember my reference services class, all the time we spent learning the kinds of questions we'd encounter in the wild, blah, blah, blah. Anyway.
Oh, as a librarian, I just am laughing.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, I definitely wanted to layer that experience, real life experience from the reference desk into the book, because I don't think people realize, the kind of work. Of course, yes, we do help people with their research sometimes, but I would say 9 out of 10 times I'm answering calls like that at the reference desk versus like helping someone with a research project. And I don't think people understand completely the role that libraries have begun to fill in society today, which is as a kind of stopgap for all of these other institutions that have failed people. We take care of people at libraries. We give them information. We talk to them when they're lonely. We help them with questions. So
Yes,
not just book warehouses.
yes. There are some libraries that actually have hired their own social workers.
Yeah, I think that's
Um,
becoming more common.
yes. I wish we
Yeah,
had the budget for that. I
I
feel
know.
like I sometimes as a librarian, I think you feel out of your depth a little bit with
Yeah,
some of these.
we're
And then
not
you,
trained as social workers.
yeah,
I imagine that nothing on the other end will change. It will just like become part of the, curriculum of master's degree programs, probably.
hmm yeah, I do hear more conversation about this changing role of the library and whether or not we're equipped
Yeah.
um, to handle these aspects of our patrons' lives. And
Yeah.
but as librarians, at least for myself, I always feel maybe it's that caregiver, like you mentioned, the caregiver mentality. But I
Yeah.
always feel responsible and that I could do something to make a difference. So
Right. Yes. Yeah, I
yeah,
enjoy as much as I've looked at the dark side of caregiving or caretaking in this novel, like I love helping people. And that's partly why I'm a librarian. Like I love it. But I also think there is a dark side to it. Like there's a part that, or I guess when I see someone who is really into helping people, I also ask, or I ask in this novel, what's in it for them? What are they getting from this for themselves? And both Patricia and Margo get things for themselves.
yeah, yeah. Um, Laura, so you mentioned you're working on a new project.
Yeah.
Uh, would you like to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can talk about it a little bit. Like it's hard. This book does have a kind of massive twist in the middle, or a surprise, I guess you could say. So it's hard to talk about, but it's basically it is sort of another thriller, or at least psychological suspense, which is how I think of my books more often than as thrillers. Um,
Hmm.
but it is set in the late 60s, and it's based on a true story, loosely based on a true story. But it is about a woman who's a housewife and mother of grown children, and she's also an amateur photographer, and she also has a traumatic incident in her past, and she's a really good photographer. Doesn't quite know how good she is, but she starts taking these self-portraits in the way of Vivian Mayer, who is a photographer from the 50s that some of you may know. And when she develops the film, she starts to see this male figure in the background, only of her self-portraits, like he's back there lurking. And so she thinks she is being stalked, and it kind of goes from there.
Wow. I'm
So
loving uh these concepts for your books.
good, I'm glad.
Yeah.
This one is
Yeah.
really hard to write. I don't know why, but I'm getting towards the end of it and getting things in shape. So I
All
hope to
right.
be finished soon.
Well, you have to keep us apprised at the
Yeah.
library of where you're at. I always tell
Yeah.
all the authors I interview that because I always like to know,
Yeah.
what they're up to.
Yeah.
Um, and for everyone here tonight, thank you so much. I know that a number of you are in our book club for next week, and Laura will be joining us
Yeah.
next Thursday at 2:30, right? Or 2:45, around 15
Oh, okay.
minutes
I have it written down.
um,
Okay.
at the end of our book club. And for
Okay.
those of you who would like to join our book discussion of how can I help you next Thursday, I will put a link here into the chat. You can go to this site to sign up for our book club. It's on Zoom. And we would love to have you. We'll have a fun discussion. Laura, I can talk to you for hours, you know that,
Oh,
but
you. Yes,
I'm
me
pretty good
too.
at keeping on track. That's my rep. So I'm gonna stick with it. But thank you so much.
Everyone. Yes, this was
Yes.
great. It was really great to answer your wonderful questions.
Oh, I had a blast. And
Same.
I'm excited for you to have be part of our book discussion at the tail end of our book discussion next week.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Okay. All
Excited.
right.
Everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great evening, everyone. Good night.
Good night. Bye.